Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Weatherbys Cheltenham Bloodstock Preview. Thank you to everyone that has registered and joined us. I'm very proud to bring this preview back for the second year. I am Jess Stafford, and like you all who has joined us tonight, I am a big Bloodstock enthusiast, and I am also a big Cheltenham enthusiast. So this is a combination of two big passions, and I'm very grateful to the TBA and to Weatherbys that we get to put this on again. Weatherbys have provided some very important stats that might shock and surprise you, and I'm lucky enough to have a fantastic database at my fingertips. So should you want to have any more information about a particular stallion at this year's festival, please use the chat box and I'll give you a better understanding as to how that sire has done. And you can use that chat box for questions as well. As tonight, we will delve into the bloodlines of the leading players at next week's festival. We will highlight what bloodstock angles might help us in making our racing selections. And we are thrilled, as you can see on screen, to have an esteemed panel of specialists from England, Ireland, and France who will be leaning in to share their invaluable insights and their expertise. So, as I said, please make sure to utilize that Zoom chat box to ask your questions, which we will pick up throughout the course of the evening, as we're really, really keen to incorporate those that have taken the time to join this panel. So all questions welcome, none bad, none silly at all. But look, as we know, the build up to the festival can often be overrun by tipping previews. But tonight we're going to strive to do something a bit different. We're celebrating the quality and pedigree of the horses participating, which is really a testament to the meticulous breeding and selection processes that bloodstock agents, breeders and specialists undertake throughout the year. So without further ado, let's celebrate breeding at the 2025 Cheltenham Festival and introduce our panel. So if I ask you panelists to unmute yourself, and we will be able to say hello and you can give us a little wave. First of all, back for a second year running, and very much the first guest I wanted to book again. It is Jane Mangan, a distinguished racing broadcaster and bloodstock specialist. Jane, I know how much you enjoy bloodstock, and I suppose probably a bit more refreshing this kind of angle into the Cheltenham preview landscape, which I know you're very busy in at the moment.
Well, Jess, I'm just pleased that you had me back to keep you honest, because I know that's the real reason that I'm here. Look, I think everybody tuning in can appreciate that there is no Cheltenham Festival, there is no horse racing without the breeders who make it happen, who produce these horses, and this is their dream. I presume that when we set out to breed a national hunt horse, we want to either breed a Gold Cup winner or a champion hurdle winner. And if you get a Grand Annual or an Albert Bartlett, so be it. But the next week, 28 races, they're the dream. That's the standard. And I think as we go through this, as we did last year, Jess, the key taking for me is usually the diversity in the winner's enclosure. And that isn't reflected throughout the industry. That isn't reflected in the sales ring. And we just constantly have to remind ourselves of that. But we have plenty of time. So I look forward to hearing everybody else's views as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And, you mentioned breeding a Gold Cup winner, breeding a champion hurdle winner. But what about the potential of breeding a supreme novice hurdle winner? And that is the hopes of Will Kinsey, who joins us as well. Of Peel Bloodstock, a breeder, a pinhooker, Will, a reputation for breeding and raising high quality horses. And that, as I mentioned, includes this year's leading fancy for the Supreme Novice Hurdle in Romeo Coolio. But you've also been responsible for the 2023 Mares Chase winner Impervious, which was a graduate of Peel Bloodstock. So you know how it feels to be on this side, waiting and hoping that you're going to have something to cheer about. But also the nerves must come rushing back in with a horse that you've nurtured from the ground up.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, to have any sort of connection to any horse that's running at Cheltenham or any of the big festivals is really exciting, let alone in the champion races, the grade ones. So to see one that you've bred especially is really exciting. Yeah, Impervious, I wasn't there that day and I was kicking myself for not being there. So I promised if ever we had one like that again, or one that we had connections to, I'd try and be there. So It's not always easy to do because it's getting pretty busy here, foaling wise. But I shall be there on Tuesday for Romeo Coolio when he runs, and be cheering him on. So yeah, very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, and we'll be going into his pedigree and others in the course of this preview. We've also got Richard Pugh, head of racing and insights at HRI and the founder of point2point.ie. Richard, you've a comprehensive understanding of the racing and bloodstock landscape, but I'm sure we'll be cheering on from the sidelines those point-to-point graduates from the Irish scene, which are plenty at the moment, especially the novices. The big Westerner comes to mind. There's so many that are graduates from your background and your playground, really. So that must give you a lot to look forward to for next week.
It does. It's all, I think, no more than this preview, you want to find out where the horses originate from, and by next weekend we'll be looking back to see where did they originate from. Now we're trying to anticipate it. At the first stage, we see many of them as at a point to point. I've been lucky to see some high class horses win their point to points and go on to bigger and better things. Point to pointing in Ireland and England is complementing this now more and more. It accounted for 35% of the runners last year. That's what it is. It's a huge proportion. It was 116 runners, 8 winners and 5 grade ones, and you have Factophile and Ballyburn coming back again to do it again, and plenty of young stock coming through. And it is fascinating when you see them in a field doing their thing, and then they go on to get to this level. Romeo Coolio being but one of them, and I'm sure we'll cover many of them throughout the evening.
Yeah, brilliant. And to make it full circle, especially to really represent every jurisdiction that play a big part in the Cheltenham Festival. Guy Petit from France, a renowned bloodstock agent, you've a wealth of experience in identifying and acquiring top class horses. Guy, we're so pleased to have you. Your background has uncovered some Cheltenham Festival winners, including the likes of Min, Alfroth, Farclar and Thousand Stars. You're very closely connected with Venetia Williams, and you'll have the likes of JLo and Victorino hopefully doing you proud next week. So I'd imagine for a good few years now, Cheltenham has been really the place that solidifies the horses that you spend every day, every passing day, trying to find the next best talent from France.
Yeah, we always try our best to find Cheltenham winners, but they are not easy to find. And this year, I think JLo has a good chance. So we'll see. But I'm working a lot with Venetia. Venetia doesn't target Cheltenham and as the goal of the season. She takes the races as they come, and so we never have a big field of runners at Cheltenham, but we have some good runners. So we'll see.
Certainly will do, and we look forward to picking your brain, especially when it comes from a French stallion perspective. There's always new stallions that we're seeing from France that are being on show at Cheltenham, and I think your insight into that is going to be very helpful. So let's crack on. We'll be previewing the championship races via Bloodstock Lens. We'll be asking the panel for their novice or from either the hurdle division or chasing division that really gets their bloodstock juices flowing. We'll ask for a sire or a dam to follow at the festival, and as I said, we will be taking your questions, so make sure to add them in and we'll ask them as best we can. So let's kick off with the champion hurdle. As the Cheltenham Festival on Tuesday is really going to kick off with a bang, with a mouth-watering race. We've got Constitution Hill, a son of Blue Brazil, also Queen of the Stage, of course, taking on the mares. We've got Brighter Days Ahead, French bred. She is by Capgard, and we think we're going to have Lossy Mouth as well, another French bred, and also the likes of State Man as well, last year's winner by Dr. Dino. So Will, I should start with you because this is Constitution Hill flying the flag for British breeding. Of course, Blue Brazil now standing in Ireland, but I know how much of a big fan you are of Blue Brazil, and I'm going to pop up his pedigree on the page as well. But is there an argument with Constitution Hill when you look at this race and the challenges that he has, that Constitution Hill is only going to get better with age, and that's might be what Blue Brazil is achieving with his horses, that they're horses that get a lot stronger as they get older?
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, we don't know that yet, really, from our ones that we've bred, from English crops. I mean, the last English crop is now 5, aren't they? And obviously Constitution Hill's 8. So we're only really just starting to see them come through. Yeah, look, there's no bigger fan of Blue Brazil than me. I was actually there when Yorton Farm vetted him. I went with Dave Futter to see him, to see Blue Brazil, the sire, to get vetted. And my first impressions were, have we got the right stallion? You know, he was a big, strong, sort of quite ordinary looking horse. And then there was a real flashy horse just next door who turned out to be Diamond Boy. And anyway, when Blue Brazil moved, you were like, oh, wow. I mean, he was an unbelievable mover and athleticism and knee action, and he just but he wasn't what you'd expect to see. And then Dave had him back, and he was supported. And then unfortunately for us British breeders, he was lost to Ireland. But I think he's a phenomenal sire. He gets horses that jump. Seems to get great temperaments. So like from a breeding point of view, he's a kind of a stallion that you would use for maybe a mare that you thought might want a bit of help with her temperament or something like that. But look, he's as from what we've seen from Constitution Hill in the past, he's as good as I've seen, and I hope we see it on Tuesday, because we could be in for one hell of a race.
Yeah, certainly. Guy, you are closely connected to Blue Brazil in his early days. He's obviously gone from France to England and now over to Ireland, and a supporter of him early on. From what you've seen, and potentially, you see a King's Theatre mare here with Blue Brazil. A dam with a not light enough page compared to the big contenders against Constitution Hill on Tuesday. Do you think that he has really injected that longevity, the as Will touched on, the temperament that has meant these horses are improving and have improved, like the likes of Royal Pagaille have done?
Yeah, but I think Blue Brazil was more stallion for the Irish and English than he was for the French market, for example. Late maturing horses, the older the better. They stay, they jump. I mean, they were perfect for UK. And I think that was a chance for him to get over. I don't think he would have had the same result if he had stayed in France, even though he was useful, but he was not sparkling as he is now in England and Ireland.
Yeah, and this is the best flag bearer of them all. Jane, will just scroll down into Brighter Days Ahead. I mean, you can have a good look at this and see it's light enough. It's done very, very well, but it's nothing compared to what Brighter Days Ahead and Matney the Dam has achieved. It's quite remarkable, really, for an unraced mare, a daughter of a Lavron, fairly unknown, really, stallion. But she is going to really take a lot of beating. When you look at her pedigree and you see what the dam side has achieved, do you see a champion hurdle winner?
Yes,
I just see a good horse. You just see a good horse. Look, I remember at the Derby sale, she got 310 grand. Not just because of her pedigree, but she is physically an absolutely beautiful mare. She's almost masculine in her features. By comparison, Lofty Mouth is a real effeminate mare. But what you would love about Matney is the diversity in what she's bred to. I remember somebody saying to me, "Oh, Kentucky Dynamite's the next big thing." I was like, "Who's Kentucky Dynamite?" It was because this French Dynamite had come out and he'd looked good. And then all of a sudden, there was people talking about his brother, Indiana Jones. Then it maybe became apparent that it wasn't coming from Kentucky Dynamite, that maybe Mighty Potter was a little bit special. This mare kept producing 5 from 5, and now she's actually in the care of Walter Connors, who's married her to Dr. Dino No Risk at All. So she has all of the class. I don't know if she's going to win a champion hurdle. I think she's going to come up against probably the best champion hurdler we've seen for 20 years or more. But the difference, and I'm only telling you what you can see already, the difference between Brighter Days Ahead and Constitution Hill is that she's not a freak. She is the best her mother has produced, but her brothers are good, whereas Constitution Hill has no right to be as good as he is. Blue Brazil is by Smadoon. Like, he shouldn't be breeding speed, but King's Theatre, I think, is where the class is coming from with Queen of the Stage. We remember him breeding horses like Q Card and Menora and Captain Chris, but he's also the dam sire of Bobsworth and Handstands. King's Theatre is such a good influence. So between the pair of them, I don't think you could have two more contrasting pedigrees.
Certainly. So with that in mind, if I told you that Capgard would be a bit of a concern, he's only had 2 winners from 53 starters, and those 2 were A Plus Tard's 2 wins. So the dam is really lifted the stallion, even though Capgard has been such a success, and it might be a bit of a surprise to see or hear that he hasn't had the winners at the Cheltenham Festival.
Yeah, that's a fair observation. Now, you're talking about A Plus Tard being an extremely good horse. Like, he was a Grade 1 winner over 2 miles in Ireland. But I think, Guard Royale is an awful lot of class as well, and Cajudal. So you're arguably blending, and Guy can rightly or wrong me here, but Guard Royale blended with Cajudal is blending 2 of the most potent sire lines in France. So yeah, I think the one thing I'm going to echo as we go through this preview is diversity, and that whole pool at the top of her gene pool, the first 4 generations, as much as we can see, it's completely neutral, and she is, from a French perspective, as good a bred filly as you'll get anywhere.
Yeah, and Guy on that Cajudal, we see through the dam sire lines a lot as well, and some of the novice hurdlers that we'll see later on have Cajudal, Saint-Descent everywhere. I mean, as much as you can find Cajudal on a pedigree, how important is it, and how much influence has he had in terms of what they can achieve and the versatility of a horse?
But Cajudal was the best, and he still is the best when it comes to broodmares. You are looking for his blood everywhere, and they go, they stay, they love the soft ground. They are really bred to be national hunt, and he was a big thing in a French breeding. And but Saint-Descent is doing the same, but it'll be hard to have one like can do that again, I would say.
Richard, just touching on quickly a point that Jane mentioned. This was a Brighter Days Ahead was a Tats Derby sale grad. Do you have memories of her? Do you remember her? I know the physique and looking more like a gelding than a mare, but she's always had a bigger reputation. She seems like she could be the best, but maybe I'll ask you the same question. Does she seem to you, when you look at a pedigree like this, a horse that could win or should be winning a champion hurdle?
I think everybody who worked for Tattersall's will remember Brighter Days Ahead. I don't ever remember another Derby sale horse or filly obviously coming in with the same aura about her. People were going down just to see her. Have you seen her yet? You need to see her. She was like a trophy on the day. John Blehan, I mean, look, all of the store guys will tell you I like my 3-year-olds this year, they're the best ever. But there was just something about the way John Blehan was saying. He just said, I don't think I'll ever get a store like her again. And he meant it. He really was. He believed in her so much. I don't know if you can at that stage, but he certainly made me think that you might be able to at that early stage, because whatever she had been showing him in her preparation, he had believed in her so much. In terms of pedigree, I'm kind of on Jane's side on this one. If you've got class, it can be pointed in many different ways. Hers happens to be now going down the 2 mile route. Maybe she's a slightly better over 2.5, but King of Kingsfield is going to try and make sure that that's as close as what she can possibly get in the champion hurdle. I mean, the variance of her pedigree, where we've just about managed to squeeze in the best of the second dam, and Constitution Hill, where I've dug into it a little bit, and I from my background can go down to dam 3 and remember Supergale won 7 points from 7 runs, and maybe in another world would have got black type, but I'm struggling to find the depth there that says he should be here. I actually remember when Constitution Hill won his champion hurdle, or was it his Supreme Novice, Blue Brazil had become hot at the sales, and I thought, I wonder now, is the market correct here? Because Royal Pugh and Mick Jazz were the best Blue Brazils out there, but the market had rolled in behind. And I thought, if Constitution Hill doesn't win, what will come behind this? But of course, he won. I think In the Pocket came soon after. Now we look at the Irish crops coming through. We've a couple in the bumper, Coco Cabana, and there's another one, the Game of Inches. So the real quality of Blue Brazil is coming through. But what is interesting is, for me, the market was very much ahead on Blue Brazil. They believed in him before the elite results were there. But I think, look, I know it's not this type of preview, but I just think all 4 are so tightly in the mix. I think they'll all come down the hill, from Statement to Lossiemouth to Brighter Days Ahead and Constitution Hill. And for whatever reason the pedigrees throw them there, it's going to be a fascinating contest.
Yeah, it certainly will. It certainly will be. But I think to James' point, you know, you've got a beautiful pedigree with a freakish one here. But both thrown out exceptional racehorses. Who's going to be best on the day? It's going to be a great matchup. Does anyone have a strong opinion who's going to beat the other, or Will does?
Well, I was just going to say, I actually find this uh, an intriguing race personally because Dave Futter and I bought French Dynamite, so that's the first one out of Matinee. We bought him as a foal out the field. So I can tell you now that pedigree didn't look anything like that when we bought him. But Jane will know, like when you're buying foals, when you're going around and you know, we weren't in the market to be paying a lot of money for foals. We were trying to buy specimens. So what I can tell you was he was a fantastic specimen by a sire. You said earlier, Kentucky Dynamite that no one really knew of, but he was a real athlete. But the pedigree is decent further back. And then also with Lossiemouth, I actually bought a Montmartre out of Mariner's Light. So a half brother to Lossiemouth before Lossiemouth. And unfortunately, we sold him and he was lost. But again, that's another fantastic pedigree, quite flat further back. Gentle Wave is the dam sire, and he's obviously stands at Yorton Farm again. So from my personal point of view, it's a race which is fascinating because I know the pedigrees of some of the leading players so well. But every time I go to the sales and see something out of Matinee, I'm just like, we went back to try and buy Indiana Jones and he made too much money and was never able to get near anything again. So it feels like the one that got away.
Yeah, well, you were there in the early days when everyone was probably wanted to start supporting Kentucky Dynamite, as Jane mentioned. And it is fascinating. What a wonderful broodmare she's turned out to be, Matinee, and I will be following her for far further to come with those unraced horses we can see on the page, set to hopefully live up to their siblings' reputation. So great insight, and whether you're on one side or the other, just intriguing from a pedigree perspective. Let's move on to the Champion Chase, as quite interesting, really. You know, if you go back a few years now, the Supreme Novice Hurdle, when Constitution Hill was beating John Bon, and it was a Blue Brazil beating a Walk in the Park, and it was still relatively early days for both stallions, and now they're looking at hopefully both claiming a championship race in the space of a couple of days. They both sort of got to this age now where they're out there, really at their prime, and John Bon, you know, he's really a champion in all but name, and you know, it brings me to the question about Walk in the Park, and this was from his time when he was based in France. And Guy, you were a very early supporter of Walk in the Park himself. And can you remind us about him as a horse, as a racehorse? And I know you had an interest in him, and even inquiring him when he went through the sale ring.
Yeah, I wasn't a bidder on him, but I mean, he was a huge horse. He had everything to be a national hunt prospect with his pedigree and his form and everything, but just made a little bit too much. And but like Brazil, I thought he's much better on in England and or Ireland than he would be in France anyway. Dropping big stock, you know, and we need plenty of time. Here in France, we're always a bit in a rush. You know, we already have the first 3-year-old hurdle before yesterday. So we always push a bit too quick on these horses. And I think as the same as Blue Brazil, it was lucky for him to go over. You know, that's where he will have and he shows that he will have the best chances anyway.
So with that in mind, you know, were your early expectations of him as a stallion when you saw how big he was, that these horses required the time, and that the horses that were coming from France sort of needed the early grounding that they might get in England and in Ireland, which is probably a bit of a shift to what we do think, that we get told that, you know, getting them to learn to jump earlier in France can be such a benefit, but with these Walk in the Parks, it's been the best for them to give them as much time as possible.
Yeah, but that was easy to say for me after when you see the first falls. They were because sometimes you buy big horses, the big stallion doesn't drop big falls all the time. But Blue Brazil and Walk in the Park were dropping big things, big falls, and then you realize that they would be better over there. Take your time and give them plenty all the time they need. which they wouldn't have here, because here it's a matter of getting, we jump them at 2 and get them ready for the first 3 hurdles if they are precautious enough, and we never give them enough time. Well, it works. We cannot complain, but I think sometimes we should be a bit more patient.
Okay, and they've been patient with John Bon, but they've also ran him, and they've been very competitive with his race planning. Jane, Walk in the Park, there's so much that's said on him. He's been very much the talking horse for so many years now. He got a couple more winners at the Cheltenham Festival last year. We're going to see plenty more the Irish bred Walk in the Parks now. How important would a championship race be for Walk in the Park at this stage?
I think it's widely believed that he's the best on the market. So I don't look, obviously you need to be getting those winners if you're standing for 25 grand, but he will get those winners. Final Demand looks so exciting. Obviously we've Taro, who we'll get to later on. There's just so much diversity in what he's produced. And I don't think I've ever thought a National Hunt horse was good value when he cost £570,000. But this guy, when he won, was a full brother to Duvan, who we all thought was a god. Unfortunately for Duvan, the wheels fell off his wagon. But this fella has he has longevity, he has consistency, and he has class. Like, he's never been out of the first 2 in his life. He's what has he won 10 grade ones? He's just an incredible horse. And I know we'll talk about Starface briefly. Like, I don't know, and if somebody's listening in, tell me if I'm wrong. I don't think a horse has ever produced, a mare has ever produced a horse to win two horses to win grade ones at the Cheltenham Festival, particularly 2 full siblings. So that would be a first, I think, if this horse were to win the champion chase, because actually people forget he hasn't won the Cheltenham Festival yet. So he's a special horse. Now, the one thing I will say is he could have gone either way as a young horse. He was very fiery and he was teetering on the edge of crazy. And they managed to bring him back, and that has their handling of John Bon has attributed to the longevity of his career, and it's hard to believe he's actually still only a 9-year-old. So yeah, fabulous horse. But just before I move off, I think the champion chase is so diverse again this year. Marine Nationale is out of a mare that won over 1.6 miles for Sir Henry Cecil by his son of Shamadal, who got no mares, French Navy. And like, if you told me his son of Shamadal would excel over fences, like, I know he won a Supreme, but he's just he's a bit of a freak, that horse. And Argument, Denim Red got no mares, and he managed to get this guy in on the so. Gaelic Warrior, I think that horse Maxios is the best value on any market. 4 grand for a horse that's produced how many Cheltenham Festival winners? I love Monson, so I just think that there's just a bit of something about him. And if you scroll further down, I think Found of 50 is going to go here, Jess. And Found of 50 came from a crop of 2 runners. I think he covered 4 mares that year, Solskjaer. 2 runners, one of them is Found of 50. Solskjaer, nobody will know him, only that he was some footballer way back when. But this horse actually is a full brother to Yates. He's a full brother to Yates. And if I said a full brother to Yates, you'd say, okay, so he's going to be a stare. But this guy actually has a bit of zip about him. I know he's 20-1, but stranger things have happened in the champion chase. It just goes to show, like, you just never know where a good horse is going to come from. John Bon is a little bit like Brighter Days Ahead. He is quite obviously there to be good. His brother was a champion. He's a full sibling. But when you slide down through the market of the champion chase, there could not be a bigger range of diversity.
Yeah, and it's quite right. We've seen the speed influence of the size from some of the past winners. Even last year, Captain Guinness by Arakan, High Chaparral, the Sire of Altior going back, and but to that point as well, there's been such a range. But John Bon is the obvious profile. But I'd like to pick up on the point on how much he's sort of matured, but how the horse is probably done, to Guy's point, favours by going down a slower road. And Richard, he was a horse that I'm sure you will remember greatly from when he won his point to point. He's a horse that clearly had quite a pretty big reputation at that stage, being related to Duvan. But can you remember him as an early type, and whether he had that sort of hot-headedness, fizziness that we saw in his early days on the racetrack?
I wasn't there the day he won. He won at Dromahane back in 2020. He won 15 lengths. I think everybody knew. I remember him being bought at the Derby sale because Douvan was such a big deal. Just to say at this point, actually, I thought that Douvan could be the best 2 mile chaser not to win a champion chase. And if John Bond doesn't, he would be one of the great names not to be on it. It'd be extraordinary if that dam, if Starface doesn't have one name on it. She absolutely deserves it. But in terms of his point, he didn't convey anything outward from the meeting that he had done anything untoward that I remember. But that could largely be because I obviously believe in the background of horses going point of pointing, and Derek's ability to put horses to sleep, particularly horses with speed, when he knows I just don't need you and I don't need you for a while, and he can put them to sleep, not worry about the speed of the race or where he is in the race. For a horse like John Bond, I can only imagine what a wonderful start point that was for him versus maybe turning up in a 2 mile hurdle, because Derek could take all the time in the world to get him to relax, to jump, to breathe, and then introduce him into the race. He had time to do that. Whereas if he turned up in Nicky Henderson's and he ran first time out over 2 mile, Nico de Bonneville would have had to put him in the races a little bit earlier. Look, he would have been a good horse either way, but I think it probably suited him to come the route he did.
Yeah, and a quick one on Founder 50. Jane's mentioned that horse, who again, another Irish point-to-point graduate, Bolter, back in 2021. Possibly, I'm just looking at the odds now, went off at 5-2 again. Don't know if there particular memories of this horse, but I'd say that he probably raised a few eyebrows just with his slightly left of field pedigree.
He did. He threw everybody because he hit the line in Boulton. It's a good old climb up that hill, and he just kept going. And the video spanned up to him after they went by the line, and he was still going out past the fence, past the line, which sort of said, oh, he'll stay all day. He then came to the sales, and nobody really knew what to do with him. Now, he did go lame at the sales. He wasn't 100% sound that day, so you'll see that he didn't sell. But even at the sales, people were, he was wow, but he's a Solskjaer, is that good enough? And they really didn't know what to do with him. So, well, they obviously left him where he was, and Gordon followed up on him and bought him thereafter. He's bred by Tom Fahey, a well-known farrier over here. I think his last win, obviously, it's not his last run, when you look at it, and he's 20-1, beating Solness, beating Sinesia, and beating Banbridge. We're not that type of preview, but 20-1 sounds interesting.
Okay, so if you do want a tip based on the diversity of pedigrees and what they can throw, and also a horse that got the roots from an Irish point-to-point field, and now has got a decent each way price for the champion chase, there we have it. Shall we move on to the Ryanair Chase, a race which has divided opinions, with the fact that it probably diluted this year's Gold Cup, giving another option to the horses that I probably had thought were going to be going into that Gold Cup. But I'll give you a bit of background from a bloodstock perspective with this race. The last 10 winners have all been French bred, which will put a smile on Guy's face.
Yes.
You have to go back to 2013 when Q Card was the last horse bred outside of France to win this. So maybe they're all dodging Galopin des Champs, but who will be at their perfect trip over 2 mile, 4.5 furlong? I suppose that is the big question. So Guy, we'll start with you, because JLo is a horse that you've got a close association with, purchased this horse for the Venetia Williams team. Tell us a little bit more about this horse and his pedigree, and I suppose the stallion, who stands for a modest sum. I think it's correct to say just €3,700.
Yeah, Montmartre is not the most fashionable side in France, but he's done well. So, but I also like very much the dam side with Balco, who really breed the horses who stays and jumps. They can jump anything and stay all day. And this horse won when he won. When I bought him, he won at Strasbourg or Nancy or somewhere. He has to have some class to win there for a horse bred like he is, So I thought he could be special, and I think he is special. So we'll see. And with a new waiting tactic the last time, it was very impressive.
Yeah, and he's got a good pedigree, a good blend of stamina, but of also a bit of speed there. Is that what you look for? He's obviously comes from that Pistolet Bleu Man line from Balco as well. So is that the kind of horse that you really look for, that really excites yourself and Venetia?
But before I look at the pedigree, I look at the performance. And when I see a performance which really interests me, and then I look deeper into the pedigree. But I don't start with the pedigree. I'll start with the performance, and then I go on, and then I say, oh, doing that by that side, going that on that trip, then that's very, very promising. That's the way I work. I don't really go on and say, oh, this one is a walk in the park with one. I see a horse and then I look who he is by and how he did that, you know.
And with him, with this race in mind, 2 mile, 4.5 furlongs, is this just the beginning? Do you think he could get even further, or is this the kind of trip that you see that he will be at his best at?
On the dam side, you would say he would stay further. Now there is more march. You was a 2,000 meter, mile and a half on the flat, and you can bring a bit of speed. So it's a tricky question. But I'm pretty sure he would stay 3 miles if he has to. And the way they rode him last time, I think he will have no problem.
Yeah, and it's very much a case of horses that they really have to stay 3 miles to be able to get the best out of them. Which probably brings me back to Fat to File, who's the interesting horse. Richard, I'll come back to you. He's French bred, but he's Irish raised. He won a very strong Bell Harbour maiden. Again, I was slightly surprised that we see him in the Ryanair, but whether he's dodging Galopin des Champs or whether they feel like this is actually in fact his best trip, that's the kind of question that I'm asking those that have got more knowledge than I do. What would your gut feeling say with a horse like this, and has he developed into a more of a speed-based horse despite what the pedigree might say?
He's slightly unusual in that he didn't run until he was 5, which for most of the pointers that we talk about that will be featuring next week, most of them will run age 4, the likes of John Bunn, etc. He beat Asian Master in his point of points, so it was a race of real depth. I listened to see Willie Mullins did an interview with Fran Berry, I think yesterday, the day before, and he still didn't commit to this race. And whilst everything is pointing to it, I don't know. If I'm JP McManus and I've landed on a possible Gold Cup horse, and Willie said, he'll probably develop into one, I'd love to see him have a go at it. I mean, you're 1 horse away from this horse being, leading the charge for a Cheltenham Gold Cup, or certainly in the mix for it. So on balance, I think he's maturing into how he races. I think he had a lot to learn at Christmas. He improved to a degree in terms of how he raced at the DRF, but I think there's more scope for improvement and more time for that to happen in a Gold Cup, where Mark can just put him to sleep and let him take his time. On the balance, probability he doesn't win, but I'm looking at the Ryanair on the basis that this fellow won't be there. I've nothing to base that on other than my gut is, if I'm JP McManus, I'm one of the few owners who's seen a Cheltenham winner, but a Gold Cup winner would be more interesting. So I think his style of running is still developing. I don't think he's there yet. And I think even a run in a Gold Cup, let him not win it, would benefit him for next year rather than going down the 2.5 mile route.
Yeah, it's very interesting. This time last year we would be very surprised if after his win at Cheltenham, that he'd be ending up here, not a Gold Cup, and he looked like the biggest danger to Galopin des Champs. Jane, knowing another JP McManus horse in Spillane's Tower, they're different, very different in terms of types of horses. They're sort of similar in terms of profile, but if I come to Spillane's Tower, a beautiful pedigree, one that goes all the way back down to Solness at the end that you can see there. When I looked at it, I thought actually there's a lot more speed there than I kind of had thought when I first was sort of thinking about him. But he seems to have that ability and that grind out, especially in the latter stage of his races. Do you think that he's defined maybe what's there that is obvious on his page?
Yeah, be honest, when he came, I wasn't familiar with his pedigree. I don't think my parents were either, and he just was a big frame, 16.2 frame, but when he filled his frame that he'd be a very powerful horse. He's not a big mover, and I think John Bonn's the same, because I remember seeing John Bonn as a store, and a lot of people, myself included, are suckers for this big majestic walk. Rather ironically, because of his name, Walk in the Park, the best ones don't seem to have that. Monty Starr does, but this fella doesn't. But he can gallop, and he's a great mind. A lot of the walk in the parks, their reputation is that they're a little bit fizzy. He seems to be mentally an absolute gentleman. And if you told me, to be honest, Jess, oh, he's out of a Duke of Marmalade mare, I'd probably vomit. Like, I probably would. He's not a good, I wouldn't say Dane Hill is what I would look for in the jumping influence. But I do love German breeding. It's well publicised how sound those pedigrees are, how they don't stand stallions unless they are of a certain criteria. And there's depth, obviously, to his. I love how you got Solness in down the end. I didn't even know he featured there. You must have dug very deep to find him there. But he's kind of defying, I think, his pedigree. He's got a lot of speed. You know, like we don't have anything to compare him to. But basically, when he went to Fairyhouse last year over 2.5, we weren't worried. He only got beaten by a narrow margin in the Flying Bolt over 2 miles as a novice behind Blood Destiny. I think if the races run again, he'd win. And yeah, he's just, for us, he's obviously a very special horse. Again, Monson is an influence there. Soundness of wind and limb and mind all the way through his pedigree. I'd love him to run. I don't know if he runs. I'm with Richard Pugh. If Richard Pugh can channel his JP McManus mind, I think we'd all be on the same page. But whatever lines up in the green and gold in the Ryanair for me will be the one, because there's a logic, there's kind of a suspicion about Factifile whether he'd stay. I don't subscribe to that. You know, he's by Polyglot, who's bred Don Poley, Sire de Burley, Politolog. Like, why wouldn't he stay? I think they're just getting to know him. Don't forget how inexperienced Factifile is. He never raced over hurdles. So while he won last year, he won a 2-runner race at Leopardstown, and then he went and he sauntered around in the Brown Advisory against inferior opposition. I think they're actually just learning about Factifile. We had the opportunity last year with 7 runs through the season with Bland Tower to learn all about him. It hasn't been ideal since obviously coming back from the UK when Kempton went awry. But my parents seem to be really happy with him now. And again, that's the pedigree. If you told me at the sales, here you can have that, probably wouldn't take
it. But knowing him and knowing the horse now, that's what's the brilliance and the mystery surrounding Bloodstock. Do you see that this horse and what you know of him, and maybe despite the pedigree, that he could be a Gold Cup, a true Gold Cup contender one day?
Oh yeah, I do. I think he's got it all. I think you can ride him. You can ride him as you wish. He's got it. He has the whole package. I genuinely believe that. I don't know what a Gold Cup winner is. I don't know what it takes to win a Gold Cup. I remember Patrick Mullins when he won a bumper on Faugheen way back when, and he came in and he said, "We've never had a Gold Cup horse, but I think this is what it is." But he won a champion hurdle, and subsequently they've had 4 Gold Cup winners. You don't know, but he seems to have the whole package. But so does Factifile.
Yeah, okay, well, it is interesting and remarkable, really. There are a lot of beautiful French families. Will, I know you've scoured around France going searching for French mares who you've brought back over, and I suppose the French have got a bit of a sway when it comes to this race. But just out of interest, especially with younger stallions in mind, Il Francais got his pedigree up here. Just if you've got any thoughts in particular on character and how he is doing and what you've heard about him. You know, Il Francais is the horse that kind of the talking horse that we want to see in this race because of his nature, his style of running. It's quite an exciting kind of horse to turn up in a race like this, Will. So is this the kind of pedigree we might be seeing a little bit more of, especially with the character in mind?
Yeah, I mean, character is he's been sort of well touted for the last few years. I haven't actually had any, haven't bought any, haven't sent any mares. We do send mares to France, but we haven't used them yet. That is probably because it's not just about having a great mare and sending him to a great stallion. There's attributes that you're looking for physically, mentally, whatever. And you know, he hasn't kind of fitted anything, or maybe the price isn't quite right. There's so many different reasons that you might go to a stallion when you're looking to send a mare. So we haven't actually used him. It's not because I don't like him or anything like that, but Um, I, what it's worth, I think the Ryanair, I know it'll have its knockers because people will say, oh, such and such should be in the Gold Cup and it's ruining the Gold Cup. And at the moment, the Gold Cup might look like a bit of a sort of a crowning moment procession for obviously for Gallopin, but it could make for a fantastic Ryanair. I mean, and the beauty about this race from a pedigree point of view is you've got all sorts. It really is like you've got Grange Clare West there, which is he's kind of, although he's Irish bred, he's predominantly sort of British bred. I know he's an outsider, but it just goes to show. Look, you're running over sort of the middle distance, but I really think that if you've got Factophile, Ile Francais, who's gonna set this race to light if he goes there, Gallic Warrior, Protectorat, Spillans Tower, Banbridge, Jello. Honestly, this race could be something else.
It certainly is. It's similar, isn't it, to the champion chase in terms of the diversity of the pedigrees that are on offer. Give a quick word on the French hopes will with Ile Francais, a horse that I'm sure that you've seen plenty in a toy, but he's also shown us what he can do. Is this a pedigree that you would know well yourself?
Yeah, I know him very well. About his brother for David Maxwell, chef d'équipe, and who was a useful horse, but not half as good as Ile Francais. Ile Francais was very impressive in 2 or 3 runs, very impressive. So once he was pulled up at Auteuil, we don't know why. He was very disappointing that day, but when he's in form, he's in good form, he's a true champion, I think. I think he could give them a lot of they will think about him in the race.
It certainly will add that element of thrill, the way that his running style and a couple of the others, especially Protectorat as well. Let's move on to the Gold Cup, the race where we, from a betting perspective anyway, Galopin de Champs, who should be on my list, but might not just be on here, so I'll stop showing it now. Galopin de Champs is the horse that we've all will be hoping, I suppose, from a moment in time, we'll be able to add to what Best Mate and Arkle did in taking 3 Gold Cups. The son of Timos, he's up against Banbridge, the son of Doyen, who's out of the presenting mare, Old Cotton Lass, who looks very much likely to play his presence in here, and Factophile might be there. Potentially Willie Mullins still making his decision, and we've also got Monty Starr as well. But Richard, I'd like to start with you with Banbridge, because what an advertisement of the versatility of the point-to-point graduates. Banbridge started off as a in the point-to-point field. He's gone down the novice hurdle route. He was a Martin Pipe winner. He looked all speed-based, but now he's developed into the stayer that I suppose his pedigree is already always suggested he would do.
Yeah, he's a slow burner. It took him 3 runs to not win a point-to-point, but run well enough to be sold on. He finished second at Lockmore in his last run, and he's got there. He hasn't been your win your bumper, win your hurdle, everything's good, and then you find your 150, 160, 170. Where do you cap out? But he really has got there. And if I remove myself from the emotion of the Galopin de Champs at Leopardstown, I think he's a real shout for this race. I mean, he has won a champion chase over 2 miles, which isn't jumping off the page as to why he could do that. But your better Gold Cup winners, your Kicking King won an Arkle, Caught a Star, we know how good he was over 2 miles. So they generally have 2 mile speed. I don't think if Galopin de Champs was in that race, he'd have that speed. Banbridge obviously does, but then as you rightly say, the speed, the stamina is there. You look at the second dam, and she's bred Major Malarkey, who I think won round Cheltenham over 4 miles in a furlong in a hunter chase, and you're thinking, well, there's a bit of stamina. And if you're under any doubt, you're down to Valley Henry as well. So you have loads of stamina there. He's able to win. I'm not saying he won the best 2 mile chase around, but he was even running well in the 2 mile hilly way, giving Energumene £10 just before Christmas, before staying in the King George. And I don't want to disrespect Galopin de Champs in any way, because he's obviously one of our great chasers, but he is a horse that sometimes gets beaten. And in this drying conditions, I just think that this horse will be quite a price for a King George winner who has won a 2 mile champion chase in Punchestown. and has all the stamina to say he will get 3 mile. And, you know, he's not that far related from a horse that got 4 mile one round Cheltenham. And yeah, he's one I'm very keen on for Dan McSorley, who bred him in the Gold Cup.
Yeah, to add to that, Will, a great advertisement of another presenting mare that has just got better and better over the years, and Banbridge just a youngish horse as well. We don't really know what the limits will be. Great to see when you look through that pedigree, what the dam side really offers. So Banbridge is a worthy contender to take on Galopin Des Champs. Will have to really dry out, or how do you view it?
Yeah, like I agree with Richard. It's a really interesting pedigree. The fact that he has won over 2 and he's in the Gold Cup. It's actually some friends of mine, close friends of ours, used to own Major Malarkey. So, you know, again, I was amazed when I saw his pedigree and I saw Major Malarkey on there. It just shows how sort of varied horses' pedigrees can be. And over different trips and whatever. But he's got a lovely dam line out of a presenting mare. And the second dam is a Flemensworth. So there's lots of stamina there. Look, I'm not a form person. Yeah, does he need it to dry out? He's obviously a class horse. He stayed on really well in the King George. Yeah, I mean, I think he's got a good chance. I think it could just be set up for him. I mean, I would like to see Factifile in the Gold Cup as well, but I understand why they might go down the Ryanair route. But we need some opposition to Galopin.
Yeah, we certainly do, Jane. I think that's something that as competition lovers and those that want to see, the best against the best, Banbridge looks to be the second best. If we go back to what we were talking about with the champion hurdle, I suppose both maybe Galopin Des Champs has got that Constitution Hill element. He's a bit freakish considering his pedigree, and wouldn't be the obvious Gold Cup type of horse. Would that be fair to say?
Oh, 100%. Galopin Des Champs is the best Ireland has seen since Arkle, and probably the best the Gold Cup will have seen since Cato Star. His mother produced 2 runners. Both of them are black type. She's by Marchant de Stable, who has nothing to write home about. Tim Osgood have got no mares. He's by Shalikov, who obviously produced a Gold Cup winner in Don Cossack. So yeah, there's a little bit of a thread there, but other than that, there's a postage stamp of a pedigree. As for Banbridge, Richard and Will have well publicised him. Presenting mare, presenting bred 2 Cheltenham Gold Cup winners, and is an extraordinary. I would describe him as the Galileo of dam sires. He's just so diverse in what he can produce in that sphere. He's produced the best Doyen there's ever been. But I actually think Factifile is the second best horse in the race if he runs. Ratings tell you that. He's rated 168. Banbridge is rated 165. The King George is a funny race, and I think Gilles Francais was weakening. It looks like Banbridge is staying on really well. I don't know if I subscribe to that. I was just going down through the field. It looks like we might only have 7 runners if Factifile doesn't run, which would be a disappointing turnout for the race. I think Galopin Des Champs potentially put one hand on the Gold Cup at Leopardstown, even though we know at the DRF he didn't post his best career display. Handicappers rated him 178, and his career best last year was rated 180. So yeah, he's a gorgeous horse. He's quite flawless, Galopin Des Champs. He's morphed into the perfect racehorse, I think, and a little bit like Constitution Hill. If you just put him into the sales ring, I don't think their pedigrees would inspire many people. But unlike Constitution Hill, he's a beautiful, beautiful individual. He has quality through and through. And if you actually get an opportunity to go up close to him, he might be narrow, and he's quite fine, a fine horse, but he's very tall. And the scope that he has when you see him over a fence, he's a joy to watch.
Yeah, certainly is. He is and he's got even better, it seems, this year. and really brings out the best of him, both Leopardstown and Cheltenham, hence why we've got a smaller field size. Guy, we shouldn't dismiss L'Empresse by the stallion that you know so well in Diamond Boy, a horse, a horse that potentially might be overlooked just slightly. It hasn't. He was fourth in the race last year, but the stallion Diamond Boy is giving his horses so much stamina. Do you think that L'Empresse could have a good chance second time round?
I hope for Vinicius team, but I think he's just below these horses. He will run well, but I can't see them keeping up with these horses in that race. He might win a Grade 1 again, but I don't think he will be the Gold Cup anyway.
And what about Galopin de Champs and what you read on his pedigree from the dam side, Marchand de Sable?
If he comes to the sale, I wouldn't buy him. That's all.
Yeah.
And
is
not
that
a pedigree for me.
When earlier you were saying, that you've got to see the performance first and then you might look at the pedigree, but there wouldn't have been enough there at all for even if you were that forgiving.
Yeah, that wouldn't be for me anyway. No, that wouldn't be for me. I couldn't buy a horse by this stallion with this damn line, and just even though he was impressive first time out, it was just something who would keep me away.
Yeah.
But I was wrong. No.
Oh yeah, well these freaks that have appeared despite their pedigrees, there seems to be a bit of a theme as we go through, and it does emphasize how much diversity that there can be and how they can improve as well over time. The Gold Cup definitely will be interesting to see. Banbridge will be very interested to see if they do go down this route with Fat to File, but I suppose a lot of us really the romantics inside of us will be hoping that Galopin de Champs can do the 3. Okay, we've had a good look at the championship races. I wanted to come to the novice hurdlers, because I suppose novice hurdlers or novice chasers, there are plenty to choose from with the Cheltenham Festival in mind that have really caught the eye of our panelists or caught the eye of those who are keen to see how their pedigrees might develop. And I suppose we touched on Jane walking in the park and this potentially being an exceptional Cheltenham for him. Some of his horses are at this stage now where this could be, their moment to reshine. They're at that age now. And Final Demand would be one of them. He has it all for him. I suppose the question at the moment is what trip he might be given in terms of his options. I'll try and get up the pedigree as we talk. But here we go. A horse that, as you can see, when you look at when you want to see clues from a Cheltenham Festival perspective, with the likes of Ballyburn and Bob Ollinger appearing quite soon under his 3rd and 4th dam. What does this read to you, and what does it point out, especially from a distance point of view?
Well, the first thing I'd see is the Railway Man, an extremely good horse. And then the second thing I'd remember is this is a Ken Park Hill pedigree. So it's, on the flat you have the Aggie Can and Coolmore and Darley and whatever, and all the great breeders. And Ken Park Hill is one of the great national hunt breeders in Ireland. Remember Zuska winning at Leopardstown, she's quite a classy mare. She's probably best at 2.5 miles. And then the next thing you look at is walking the park over Flemingsfirth. And naturally you're going to think, oh, there's a bit of fire, across the fire there. But you remember that Nick Rocket came from this cross. And I think it's a cross that's going to emerge more and more as people try and diversify bloodlines. They're going to think, well, if I cross Mangan with Alleged, I might get a firecracker, but I might get a really good horse. This guy has a really good mental constitution, much better than maybe you'd expect for his pedigree. Willie Mullins post-race at the DRF was very adamant to emphasize that he's not a slow horse, even though he won that 2-6. So I don't think there's any suspicion that he's going to go for the Albert Bartlett, that he's going to run the Turners in the intermediate trip. So that's the walk in the park there. I just want to name off a few horses for you, Jess, just to give you an idea of the quality he's got running next week. So in the park is a big price for the Supreme, but Firefox is no back number in the handicap over 2.5. the changing man's favourite for the Ultima. Jatara is a great mare. We just mentioned Final Demand. The Enabler is a good horse. I don't know if Pro Park will run here, but he's a dual Grade 1 winner already this year. Master Chewy, he's big price in the championship. He's a good horse. John Bon, Maureen, of course, completely unexposed mare. No Drama this end, shouldn't be forgotten about in the bumper for Paul Nichols. Aurora Vega, very good mare out of Key Vega. Spalance Tower, we've mentioned. Life in the Park, La Malle Maison. Limerick Lace by Luminescence. Monty Star in the Gold Cup. And yeah, he's just it now at the moment. He's just it now. He got great mares and he got big numbers, but he did for good reason. When you think what he got in France off nothing, this is to be expected.
And Guy, we have to ask you with that in mind, because you were very much an early supporter of Walk in the Park, with the likes of Min, who you bought at such a small amount. They're now going for hundreds and hundreds of thousands, but it would be worth you reminding us of the purchase of a horse like Min, who went on and achieved such success at the Cheltenham Festival, and the kind of quality of dam he had then compared to the kind of dam that he might have now that you can see on screen.
Oh yeah, meanwhile, it's just it was a €6,000 purchase, which sounds ridiculous now. But he was a nice horse. He didn't have much of a page, but he was a nice horse. And my client didn't have much money to spend, and I thought it was money well spent at that time. And he put right. But Walk in the Park was not in Walk in the Park. He was, I think, he was his second crop or first crop. He was very early, very early. And he went to Yannick Foin, and he ran very well a couple of times, and he was bought by Willie Mullins, and he was a champion, a true champion.
Yeah, and the rest is history. And now you see these the kind of dams that he's receiving now. Probably goes back to your earlier point. Lovely, beautiful pedigrees, but they probably all needed that little bit of time, which sort of adds to the point you made earlier about what's really benefiting him at this stage of his career.
Him like a Royal Pagaille, for example, by Blue Brazil. When he was in France, he was a useful horse, Royal Pagaille. But he went a step up when he went to England, gave him more time. Venetia was very patient with him, and the horse was very improving with the time she gave him.
Maybe we'll have a bit of a with the number of Walk in the Parks that you listed off, a lot of them, Jane. How many would you be putting your money on that you might be going home with next week in terms of winners?
Spalance Tower anyway, obviously. I think, look, Final Demand is a very good horse, even though he's going to meet the New Lion, who, again, by Cave Tara, what a stallion he has been. I suppose I can't get away from the fact that no horse really dominates Cheltenham as good as they have been, and there have been some greats. So if he gets John Bon and one, that'll be a good week. So yeah, he's great, but again, I think there's a lot of stallions out there, and there's a lot of people listening in, and I must hold my hand up. I've been, not just one or two, but a number of people have pulled me to justice. Highboard produced Granville again in Morley Street, 2 full brothers by Deep Run in the 80s to win Grade 1s at the festival. So credit, I bow to you. You have better knowledge than I. It certainly goes back further than me. I think there's more diversity in terms of stallions if they're given the opportunity to shine, and there will be horses come up by obscure stallions that we might not yet appreciate, but one good winner at the Cheltenham Festival can change the trajectory of a young stallion, and that may well happen next week.
Yeah, Walk in the Park has got 41 on last count number of entries, and then there's a bit of a gap, and that's to Cave Tara with 22 below. So that might let us move on to a very important son of Cave Tara for Will Kinsey, who's in question, Romeo Coolio, who's looking to go one better than his champion bumper effort last year and win the Supreme Novice Hurdle for Gordon Elliott. Will, take us through this pedigree, because you went to France to go and source Miss Bailey the dam, and you went and you found a horse that was already in foal, I think it was, right, or had already had one at least. But the pedigree has improved since you went and bought her. Can you remind us what you saw when you first came across her in France?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we did JD Moore. I spoke to JD and we organised a tour to France, and he said, "Well, what do you want to look at?" I was like, "Look, I want to look at brood mares, foals, yearlings, whatever." But it was quite late in the year. It was kind of, I think it was like September kind of time, and this was. I remember we literally organised a trip around the whole of France. So we flew into Paris and we were going out of Pau, Biarritz, and then flying back out of I think Lyon it was, and we actually changed our flights to go back out of Paris because we saw her at, like, the first stop, and then did the rest of the country and came back. But the country had been pillaged, like there was nothing left. All the clever Irish pinhookers had been round. There was no, there's very few nice foals, yearlings, whatever. And I bought 3 horses on the trip. One was a Cap Rock, which we left out, which we sent back to France to run. He finished second, and then unfortunately got injured. The third was a gorgeous horse by No Risk at All, but he wasn't very big. But I loved him. He was an athlete, and I just said, JD, we can't leave him here. And we bought him for little money, and he turned out to be Orcan Risk, Betfair hurdle winner. We made no money on him, so probably a bad buy as a pinhooker. But he's gone on to prove what we thought. And then the third was this mare. So I love the pedigree. I loved Cap Soleil. So we saw her, and I spoke to Fergal. And Cap Soleil was just a mare that I'd followed, and she was a full sister to her. She was a very good novice hurdler in England. I love Cap Guard as a sire. Wasn't probably at the time. I didn't really know whether he was going to be a good dam sire or not. But the mare was just probably contradicting myself a little bit. She is plain but gorgeous, if that makes sense, with a lovely temperament. She almost looks quite masculine. She got lots of depth. She's very correct, and yeah, so we bought her with a Marceline colt, foal at foot, and foal to Great Pretender. Ian Ferguson actually bought the Marceline privately from us, nicely at home, and they thought a lot of that, and unfortunately had a tumour on his spine, and they lost him. And then what was inside her belly was Ascending Lark, who was with Harry Derham, and she's won her last 3 on the bounce novice hurdles. She's a very good mare. And then there was Romeo. So she'd had, so obviously she had a Marteline at foot, then she had the Great Pretender filly, and both those foals were absolutely gorgeous, just like the mare. And so when you've sort of seen 2 foals by different stallions, I was kind of thinking, well, if she throws to how she looks, then hopefully you could almost send her anywhere. But she'd served me well. We'd got good money for the 2 foals, and I could afford to go to Cave Tara, which is probably what it comes down to, really. Plus, obviously, he was proving that he was a very good stallion. He was the best stallion and the most commercial stallion in this country. So he was commercial and decent, and she deserved to go there. So it's worked out very well for everybody along the line. Nick Brown, who brought Romeo as a foal from me privately off the farm. JD brought him up to the farm, and then obviously the Monbeg lads, Donecker, had him, and they paid good money for him, 92,000, I think it was. I think Richard Pugh was even the auctioneer that day. I think he put the hammer down, and then obviously he then went and made 420,000 at Cheltenham, and I was in the ring that day, and it was like, oof. And then to be there the next year when he was just beaten in the bumper was heartbreaking, because no one wants to be second. But look, he's a Grade 1 winner now, and whatever he does in the future, I think he could be he could be just as good a chaser, if not better. Look, it's fantastic to be here.
You must look. It's only natural to look at the competition, the opposition. Copec de Board is the one, the talking horse. I think I might have him above us at some point. He's kind of got that I mean, when you look through that pedigree, it's black and bold. There's plenty going on under that first dam. You know, it's got that French influence, that Cadet de Mar that you see. The No Risk at All is kind of it's a sexy profile, isn't it? But yours is got all of that speed that you want, and it's got all of that success that you know you've nurtured as well. Do you look at them and do you make comparisons? Do you think, oh, mine potentially has got more of this? It's probably got that temperament as well, which we know that Copec de Board has been a little bit fiery in the preliminaries.
Look, I think when you're looking at a horse race, you're looking at form, aren't you, really? You know, because once it doesn't matter how well it's bred, you know, if it can't run, it can't run. You know, we've seen on here today already pedigrees of horses which are pretty weak, but they're amazing race horses. So it doesn't always work out. And, you know, it's interesting when you heard Guy earlier saying, you know, exactly that. You know, he's an agent buying horses for people, and he doesn't really, the pedigree is secondary because, you know, if it's proven it can run at a certain speed and jump 18 fences or whatever, you know, that's what they're looking at. It doesn't really matter what it looks like or what the pedigree is. But, you know, when we're breeding, I say it's not just the case, well, I don't think it's just a case of going to the best sire. You know, there are attributes that you're trying to put on a mare or into a family. And when we're buying foals or youngsters, you know, we are willing to give different stallions a go if there's a bit of pedigree there. But if it's fundamentally, it has to be an athlete. So, but what I can say with Miss Bailey is that the foals that we have had, the whole thing all the way through is quite amazing because they were gorgeous foals and they sold well, and you know, certainly the first couple have looked, you know, above average. But obviously Copec de Board, his pedigree, it's one of those French families that, you know, obviously the way they named them with the de Board, but you see that family all around, you know, in different lines off it. I mean, it's fantastic. No Risk at All. He's probably, you know, he's probably up there. He's probably he's certainly probably the most fashionable stallion in France commercially, and you know, he's proven. And then obviously, as Guy's already touched upon, he's out of a Cadet d'Almer and Garde Royale. I mean, it's like, if I wanted to go to if I went to a sale and tried to buy that as a foal, I'm sure you'd be paying mega money.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious, isn't it? Is it, Guy, we asked about Galopin de Champ pedigree, and I know, you know, Will said this, you know, it's not necessarily about the pedigree, all about it, but that's the type of pedigree that you sort of really want to see, and it's no surprise that No Risk at All has been visited by a dam like Miss Berry.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, but it's a top class French family, so it can't be better. The cross is good. Everything is the mare is breeding winners after winners and top class winners. Yeah, if that horse comes to the sales, he'll make a fortune. You know, so it's really what you're looking for as a breeder, as a bloodstock agent, whatever.
And Richard, it leads me to a point about, you know, what you get to see on the point-to-point field, because we talk about breeding in France or in England or in Ireland, and the likes of Romeo Coolio, bred in England, makes its way to Ireland. So you must see such a variety of stallions making their way around point-to-point fields. And when you see a son of Cave Tara who's come out and showing what he can do, I'd imagine he looked like quite an obvious type of point-to-point horse, but with that little French influence as well. So he was probably likely to be quite precocious at the same time. What were your memories of him?
Seeing different sires we do, and sometimes it can trigger the market a bit like Jane mentioned earlier with Kentucky Dynamo. You know, we can see 1 4-year-old win, and all of a sudden, because it wins, we know nothing else. This is our only piece of information, so the market follows a little bit. This is obviously different. This was Cave Tara when he came along. I actually didn't realize until today. Tattersall's put up a tweet that I had dropped the hammer down. So well done, Will. You don't realize when you sell stores what you're selling. I think the interesting thing with the Supreme Novice, and I'll bring this back to Romeo Coolio, I have a sort of I'm intrigued by Work Ahead, who's done a workforce. His dam had 3 runs. She was beaten 180 lengths on debut, and then she pulled up twice. So her first run was her best run. The Grand Dam had 5 runs, 13th, 17th, ran out 15th and 15th. And I just think in the context of us talking about the number of different ways that horses can make their way to Cheltenham, there could be nothing less obvious than Work Ahead turning up there, albeit the Grand Dam bred classified who won the Cleve Hurdle. So now we come to Romeo Coolio. And Romeo Coolio's dam, according to the Racing Post website, I think they're missing a run, had 12 runs career, 8 of them by the end of her 3-year-old year, including a winning chase. And in those runs, she came up against Bay d'Azile, who Ross O'Sullivan had a good staying mare. She too had 8 or 10 runs as a 3-year-old and ran over hurdles and fences as a 3-year-old. So it's just such a fascinating mix of, we're trying to delve into pedigrees and good pedigrees here. And there's Work Ahead, who shouldn't be in the same field as Romeo Coolio, but will turn up with a chance. Romeo Coolio's dam had proven all by the age of 3, and she checked out at June of her 4-year-old year, and she was gone to the breeding shed at that stage. So it is fascinating. I remember him also from the Cheltenham sale. He turned up and made 420,000. And look, he's been an obvious one from the get-go. But just the variance that's coming into these novice hurdles, when we're here trying to work out what's the trick, what's the key, what's the consistency, there just isn't.
Yeah, certainly. And I suppose that's when you look at all the point-to-point graduates that you'll be seeing next week. I think, as I mentioned earlier, the big Westerners, one of the other ones that comes to mind, Final Demand. Of interest, Richard, is there one that you're really, you've got a bit of a soft spot for, that you remember from their point-to-point days that might be running in one of the novices next week?
Not so. I mean, I saw Final Demand win, and normally good horses sort of, more often than not, they stand out. And Final Demand, really, I found him underwhelming in his point-to-point. He just didn't do it for me. But yet his Limerick run was so good. I mean, to be awfully obvious, the horse that stood out from the moment he walked into the parade ring was Ballyburn. I mean, I know how desperately obvious that is, but he just walked in and you went, this is different. He should never have won his point-to-point. He was badly hampered after the second last. It was game over. He still went away and won well. And he's been what he's been since, out of an Old Vic mare by Flemingsford. And to me, moving slightly off the pedigree side of things, when I see racing at Leopardstown from the commentary box, not the television, the head-on camera in Leopardstown that most of you will be watching sees a very different type of jump than I see, because I'm looking at it on the binoculars down the far side. Most people watch on the screen, and 2 horses that stood out to me, but nobody else in terms of jumping, we'll get to Majbur in a moment, probably is Ballyburn. So Ballyburn's jumping to me is absolutely adequate and better. It just looks to me like he's keen, and Paul is trying to not let him let down over his fences. And he's such a strong horse that I think Paul is trying to, just restrain the energy within. He didn't want to give him a squeeze down to a fence and land going quicker. And watching those 2 horses down the back straight, to me, I thought Majbur was an exceptional jumper. Everyone else saw a different story. And to me, Ballyburn is a horse that when he gets to Cheltenham and he starts to just let him down and let him jump and go a stride quicker, I think you'll see a better horse. So Ballyburn stood out. That's a very long-winded answer to your question. Better Days Ahead as well. He looked exceptional in his point-to-point. It hasn't quite delivered, but in his point-to-point, he looked wow. And it doesn't always work out when you get to 140, 150, 160. The truth really emerges.
Yeah, and to the point on Ballyburn, there's been a lot of conversation I've heard and plenty of preview chat that Ballyburn's jumping isn't good enough. And that's why he might be one of the weaker favourites of Willie Mullins next week. But as you say, from your perspective, maybe hasn't been allowed to show off his jumping. And the Sagino race wasn't really the best advertisement of that.
Yeah, well, look, he was definitely on his head against Sergino. I think we know that, but I just think Paul felt he needed to conserve energy. He's dropping back, or he's moving up in trip, and he needs him to spit it out and relax, and it's not his default to do that. So I felt that Paul rode him in such a way that he wanted him to get in deep and pop and just spit it out and relax. And I think he'll be able to let him down a little bit more. And I think from a jumping perspective, we'll see a very different horse.
Okay. I'm conscious of time. We've only got about 10 minutes left, and I want to just get some views on other maybe stallions to follow, or maybe a dam line to keep an eye on. I know that, Will, there was one that you were quite interested to point out, because there are plenty of mares, and it is worthwhile, as much as we talked about the sires, the mares and what they've achieved. We talked about Starface. Having multiple winners or even representatives at Cheltenham is a huge achievement. And I think it was Diamond Bangle that you wanted to highlight, Will, as a dam that's achieving a huge amount at this early stage of being a broodmare.
Yeah, this one covers a couple of bases really. Obviously, you got East India Dock and Burdett Road, who are half brothers. So I mean, obviously, out of that mare, which is it's phenomenal, really. It's more of a sort of a flat pedigree. And East India Dock is by Golden Horn, who's obviously standing in this country and is doing really, really well. I've heard people criticize him. I find people criticize stallions far too quickly. And if the sort of the hammer to hit him with is the fact that he covered a lot of good flat mares, and so he should get good jumpers. Well, that doesn't work for me, because a good just because you're a good flat stallion doesn't mean, or just because you're a good flat horse doesn't mean you get jumpers. But he is actually proving that he's getting jumpers, and I think East India Dock looks really exciting. Burdett Road is a high class horse. I'm not what race is he going? I think he's going in the handicap, isn't he? I don't think he's going in the champion. So yeah, I mean, Golden Horn. Yeah, Golden Horn is going to be well supported by we've supported him for a good few years now anyway, and we've done well by him through the sales ring, but hopefully we've had some nice individuals. But then Blue Brazil, as you mentioned earlier, I'm a big fan of him. We actually had Copacabana here. We produced him. I think we had him. I think he came into January as of his 3-year-old career. So just we had him to prep. Typical Blue Brazil, big, lots of depth, really laid back, lovely horse to do. Took his work, and when you go to the sales and people go, "Oh, he's a lovely horse," what can you tell us? Like, just does everything nicely. I mean, but where's the limit with these horses? And then I hear Patrick Mullins saying every time he worked him, come out and basically say the same thing. That to me is a trait from that stallion. So yeah, Golden Horn and Blue Brazil are the two stallions I'd be keeping closest eye on. And also obviously the fact that the Blue Brazil 5-year-old is his last English crop before he moved to Ireland. So I think Blue Brazil is only going to go on and do bigger and better things.
Okay, and so that mine, I suppose you're confident that East India Dock will be able to buck the trends that all the French breds, you have to be a French bred to win the Triumph Hurdle and fly the flag for British breeding and a British-based stallion in Golden Horn.
Absolutely. I think the Triumph is changing slightly in the nature of the horses that win it. I know, this horse is probably, he might go against that, he's out of a Galileo mare. I mean, he looks, to me, from what we've seen so far, he looks like he could be a future champion hurdle horse. But the French horses, I think, do well in this obviously in this race, as opposed to sort of former flat horses, as you were. But just because of their system, they get the horses jumping earlier and produce them earlier. And you see horses, you'll see, well, Kopek de Board, he's only a 5-year-old and he's running it in a novice, and he might be going chasing next year. But the French, they could run in a Triumph this year and then be chasing next year, miss out sort of novice hurdles. So I do think that's why they have a strong record in this race.
Yeah, and it brings me on, say, to Guy. Lelamba is the horse that will be up against East India Dock. He's a son of Nirvana du Berlay, a stallion that we've heard a lot about on this side. How much do you think he's going to continue to make an impact over here in the UK, and how much is he really a talking horse, or is there other stallions outside of just Nirvana du Berlay that we should be keeping our minds on open to over the coming years?
But for me, the one where the best star that stud is Goliath du Berlay. He's really impressive, and I think he's the best of. There's Nirvana du Berlay, Beau McDowell starting to make their mark now. They were a bit slow to start with, but now they're getting better and better with the age. So that could be good news in the near future. And but Goliath for me is the one who stands out, and you will hear from him a lot, I think.
And the difference between them and I suppose the stallions that we know is that, you know, they've all jumped hurdles. There's plenty more.
Yeah.
It seems like the desire and the wanting to have stallions in France that have got that jumping background in them is becoming much more prevalent. Is that something that feels like is very key at the moment in France?
Yeah, but we had Saint-Destin, we had Cap Gard who show the way, you know. So and now we have these three horses who are very top class performers. And this year is Niche As, who's I think will also be a big thing. So at least we know they can jump. They will bring the aptitude of jumping to their stock. That's for sure.
So these are the horses that are trying to replace the Saint-Destin and the Cadadals, who are the
Cap Gard, all that, they are getting old now. Great Pretender, Cap Gard, all that. I think Cap Gard is finished anyway, and well, they're all Saint-Destin is retired, and so we need some new ones, and I think we've got some very good new ones. So it's not finished yet.
The names to follow.
Yes. Yeah.
But we've got time. We've only got a few more minutes now, so we're gonna probably end up with some questions from the audience. We've got one. It's gonna be directed to Jane. Quiz question time, Jane. No, we're not gonna trick you. Jared West has asked, how much has international flat racing affected the hurdling scene, especially the novices? Sea Pigeon and Istabrack were bred to win the Derby. Istabrack was a three-quarter brother to Secretario. Champion hurdle winners seem to be more jumping bred now. I think Faheen was the first point-to-point winner to win it, and Constitution Hill has followed him. Thank you for your question, Jared.
Yeah, very good question. It's affected it massively, and in more ways than one. So directly to answer the most obvious part of your question is, Willie Mullins got in before most of the flat bids to buy Vauban. He bought him before he won a listed race, and after he won the listed race, all of the flat bids came in, but nobody actually realised that Willie had the deal done before he won the listed race. So he would have ended up in Australia before he won the Triumph. He still ended up in Australia. Hurricane Fly would be another example. His first run for Willie Mullins, he was actually still a full horse. He ran away with David Casey and they had to geld him because they couldn't manage him. He's another horse with a listed class on the flat. He would have ended up probably being a cup horse and being sold Southern Hemisphere. The market for a middle distance Southern Hemisphere horse is huge, and while we know a lot of national hunt horses can be quite lucrative, it's very hard to compete when you know you can compete for hundreds of thousands, even purses at seven figures in Australia, Hong Kong and Japan. So that's the first part of your question. The second part of your question is, I think it's becoming increasingly difficult for stud farms to get a hold of decent stud stallion prospects, because a Group 2 horse, you see Vossenon Racing and co coming in for the likes of Courage, Mon Ami, Gregory, all these horses in training, gelding them, racing them till they're 7 or 8 or 9, and they're no longer stud viable. So what we saw in Compiègne yesterday with Coolmore racing a walk in the park Entire, I can see more of that happening. I can see Entires running over here very soon. And I think we're going to have to follow the French in terms of racing jumpers, because these flat horses are getting increasingly difficult to stand at stud. And I've no doubt if Chris Voloshin didn't get injured at Sir Michael Stout's, he wouldn't be 10 minutes down the road from me here in Munster. So yeah, it's an ever-evolving market, but we're not writing a new script. Vulgan and Fortina were fantastic French jumpers who bred Gold Cup horses, and they stood in Ireland back in the 40s and 50s. It's not a new thing. We just forgot about it for a while, and now we're realizing we should do it again.
Yes, I might add to that the BHA did a jumping review in 2015, and it was to look at the source of where horses were originating from before they went jumping in Great Britain. And in 2000, it covered 2009 to 2014. And 2009, 1,900 flat graduates went jumping, and that dropped to 1,000, down almost 900 in the period in that 5 years. You can only imagine in the 10 years since how much further that's dropped. And the only notable increase in that period were Irish point-to-pointers, who grew by 500. And it really explains the entire market, if you like, because there's your supply and demand. You're actually seeing that there were 900 less horses going jumping from the flat, and people needed to pivot. They needed a different source. and Point of Pointing was there and well placed to provide it. And that answers our gentleman's question with your Faugheen, your Honeysuckle, and your Constitution Hill. And I think we'll see more and more of that because the flat horses are gone. But there's a very real, if you look at the BHA Jumping Review in 2015, 10 years ago, it had pinpointed this already, and we're just seeing an extension of that.
Yeah, certainly. Point scene. And I have to say, Will, also we've got a good level of British point to pointers that are coming through that for next week too. I know Just a Rose is one of the highlights from Chaddersea just down the road here. So that pool hopefully is showing what they can do and competing with what has now been for a long time a strength from the Irish department, but also something that we can be proud of for next week as well from our department.
Yeah, I think so. I think Gordon's got a great. I know obviously we had Copacabana in the bumper. I'll be cheering him on, but Gordon's horse, the Mars Marvel Calypso, whatever he's called, that was bought out of the.
Yeah, he's a good horse.
Yeah, he looks very good by a stallion I like a lot. And I think Gordon bought him for not stupid amount of money. It was less than 100 grand, I think. After winning an English point to point. I think Jack Teal had him. Daring Rose, as you say. So the thing is with English pointing, obviously you don't have the strength in depth, but there's plenty of good lads there that can produce these horses. And we talk about breeding on here, but actually if you go through all the pedigrees, it's quite funny because an English bred could be by an Irish sire or French sire or whatever, or like Romeo Coolio. I bought the mare out of France, but he's an English bred. Where they're bred is where it's just where they're born. These pedigrees are so mixed. If you actually look through, it's quite fascinating. And I think the only thing for me personally, as a British breeder, that holds us back at the moment against trying to compete with Ireland and France is our system. And I think we need to be trying to encourage to get them jumping earlier and have something that can give people an option to compete with the Irish point of pointers. But that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, and it leads me back to another conversation that we had not too that long ago at Warwick Racecourse about the introduction of the junior national hurdle offering as well. So still in its early stages, but still with that idea in mind, going further afield, that we get everything going earlier, but we also have the best opportunity for our horses in this country, and the same will be applied, I'd imagine, in Ireland, and following what the French have been doing. We have got to just after 8 o'clock. So I must thank our panelists for joining us. It's been a great way to sort of look at Cheltenham in a slightly different vein. We have, I think my biggest learning, and it's probably not too dissimilar to this time last year, is about the variety, about appreciating the different routes and the different strands of pedigrees that we can find that can be on offer. And I suppose slightly more rewarding than sometimes when you look at the flat game anyway, where you can see very much a continuation or a repetition of sires. It's nice to see the variety that's on offer, and also the value that can be there too. So we wish Will especially very good luck with Romeo Coolio next week, with Jane, with wherever Spillane Tower might be going, not just now but in the future, and to Guy with Jello, and plenty of others, the likes of Victorino, who will be there. And I know that you'll be cheering on the progeny of Diamond Boy, and Richard as well, for all the Irish point to point graduates. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a wonderful Cheltenham next week. I hope you've enjoyed this preview, the Bloodstock edition. Thanks again to our partners at the TBA and to Weatherbys, and hopefully if you all enjoyed it, we might see you again next year.